Auspicious greeting to all Dharma friends from around the world. This is Venerable Zhili from Guang Shan Nantian Temple in Australia. Thank you for joining our online English Dharma service. The topic I would like to share with you today is Dancing with Life, Buddhist Insights for Finding Peace and Liberation in the Face of Dukkha. The Four Noble Truths, being one of the Buddha's first teachings after he attained awakening, has been most frequently studied and discussed by Buddhist practitioners for centuries. For those who are not familiar with the topic, please refer to the talk by Venerable Zhili back in July 2020. Today, I would like to mainly focus on the application of the teaching in our daily life, peppered with some of my personal stories and reflections. First of all, let's have a brief recap on what dukkha means. One of the most misleading and confusing English equivalents given to dukkha is perhaps suffering, which is too limited in its meaning to serve as a direct translation. Alternatively, dukkha has been translated as anxiety, uneasiness, dissatisfactions, unsatisfactoriness, and discontent. You'll probably agree that rather than life is suffering, a better translation for the first noble truth would be life inevitably gets uncomfortable, which reflects the true nature of human existence. When you were a child, you used to love and crave chocolate and cake, and you thought, when I'm getting old, like my parents, I'll have all the chocolates and cakes I want, and then I will be happy. Now that you have so many chocolates and cakes, you're bored. So you decide that since cake doesn't make you happy anymore, you will get a car, a house, a partner, a child, and then you will be happy. So now you have everything, but there are more problems. The car can be a problem, the house can be a problem, the partner can be a problem, and the children can be a problem. And you realize, oh, this is not satisfaction. I'm still unhappy. Sometimes, dukkha manifests as acute pain and suffering, or depression. Sometimes it could just be worry or simply a vague sense that things are not quite the way they should be. Even when things are going really well, for many of us, in the back of our minds, at least occasionally, is a refrain. What if I lost this person, relationship, social status, advantage, opportunity, etc. Even when we are blessed with fortunes, we're still worried about what we might lose, how we might lose it, and when. When I was young, I used to worry a lot. As the only child in my family, my parents would give me everything I wanted. Although there was never a lack of anything, I was not happy. There was always a sense of insecurity. I was worried about how one day my parents would die, how this abundant life was going to change, how I would no longer be able to enjoy the same comfort. When we look around, it's not difficult to recognize that our lives are pervaded with dukkha. Health, love, security, material comfort, all these things can be of great concern to us. Nothing gives us happiness forever. As we prepare to face dukkha, it helps to understand some typical human reactions to it. First, not accepting change. To combat the sense of insecurity change brings about, we might be motivated to fight change by protecting everything we have and trying to make things last, or to accumulate wealth, relationships, and possessions so that we manage to feel substantial. However, when change inevitably starts to make itself known, for example, wrinkles appear, health deteriorates, relationships break up, loved ones pass away, we might cling to the past or live in denial, trying to maintain or recreate the bubble of reality which we used to regard as secure and certain. Second, seeking pleasure and trying to avoid pain. In the midst of dukkha, it's also common that we might long for our pain, depression, anxiety, or stress to go away. To block out the realization of dukkha, we might try to grasp something pleasant, or simply not think about it by using distractions or intoxicants to numb the senses and the concern. For example, people on drugs or get drunk in order to become so-called worry or carefree. Number 3, acting on emotions and taking them as real. Most of us strive for perfection, desperately wanting things to always be good. When they're not, it is hard to cope emotionally. Worry, fear, pain, anger, resentment can constantly call for our attention. Our habitual reaction is to use emotions to regain our ground, or to fool ourselves about what's really true by spreading blame and self-justification. By giving these emotions full attention and fanning their flames, we're trying to make everything secure and predictable again. Can you recognize one or more of these types of common responses in your own life? Be honest with yourself. What is the consequence of typical reactions to dukkha? The more we hold on to what we believe life should be, or what we believe we should be like, the more dukkha there is. To give in to any of these common reactions is doomed to failure. Like drinking poison to quench a thirst. When we don't look deep into our life, we won't fully and truly understand the nature of human existence. That is, the question of dukkha and way to liberation. Actually, this was something that inspired the Buddha's whole spiritual quest. He observed the lives of people around him and saw people more or less subject to their conditions. Happy when their circumstances were fortunate. Stressed when their situations were less than ideal. And miserable when they were unfortunate. So, the question is, do we really have a choice about being happy? If we do have a choice, why would we choose to be unhappy? The Buddha told us that we would never find happiness unless we understand the cause of it and how our attachment and delusions of the mind arise. Before I move on to talk about this, I would like to share with you one of my personal stories, my personal reflection on the dukkha and its source. The story begins with the cushions in the meditation hall of Nantian Temple, which have been used for more than 20 years. Last year, we decided to order a new batch, but they were very expensive. Despite the price, we still ordered 57 sets. New cushions were ordered in order to give each retreat participant the best meditation experience. One day, 57 sets finally arrived by sea. They were brand new. And both the stuffing inside and the material outside were of very good quality. I was very excited. I kept them in the meditation hall so that only people meditating in the hall could use them. Until one day, probably after a month, one cushion was found missing. I got very upset. There were plenty of old ones. Why did someone take the brand new one? I was worried that whoever took the cushion might use it every day, so the cushion might be worn out very quickly. Then I also got angry because someone took it without permission. How could they just break in and take one without notifying me? Don't they know that I was the person looking after the meditation hall? Or do they just not care? Well, you might be thinking, taking a cushion isn't a big deal. But back then, I was making a really big fuss over the issue in my mind. Why was that? What do you think was the cause of my dukkha? I reflected on my personal experience and discovered that, firstly, deep in my mind, there was a concern. I was hoping the good quality of the cushions could be maintained. I could picture them still in perfect condition 5 years later, 10 years later, just as perfect as they were when they first arrived. The more often people use them, the shorter their lifespan is. And I wouldn't want that to happen. You might be laughing at me. All conditioned things are subject to change. But I had craving for the good quality of the cushions to last. In other words, I resisted the experience of unpleasant feeling arising from the worn-out cushions. Secondly, I was the person looking after the meditation hall. When someone just took the cushion without permission, it became a disrespectful behavior which needs to be blamed. Hang on. What if it was not me, but another venerable looking after the meditation hall? And when they told me, you know what? Someone just took one of the brand new cushions, I might just shrug it off with a laugh. Oh, really? But it's a totally different story when the thing happened to me. So, all the drama was actually caused by the deep-rooted I. Deep underneath self-justification and self-righteousness sits a sense of self which we cling onto. Ungrounded and often experienced as a sense of lack, this cognitive illusion can defend the ego, which leads to unwholesome thoughts, speeches, and actions. It turns out that dukkha is not caused by the circumstances of our life, but instead by how we view and relate to our experience. All conditioned things are subject to change. However, instead of letting them be the way they are, we often resist the unpleasant experiences and try to grasp the pleasurable things and seek lasting happiness in them in order to feed and nourish the self. In other words, we often push the unwanted experiences away from us and pull the favorable ones toward us. It's our resistance and craving that lead to dukkha. It also helps to differentiate between pain and dukkha. Pain, as a type of feelings we have to endure naturally in order to be alive, is a straightforward and uncomplicated response to stimuli. Dukkha, on the other hand, is the next step we take to act on the painful feeling, craving to be free of it. To put it simply, a painful and hurtful situation doesn't necessarily cause a whole lot of dukkha unless we become resistant and obsessed with replacing pain with pleasure. Then what is the path leading to peace and liberation? The different parts of the path can be grouped into 3 essential elements of Buddhist practice: wisdom, meditative concentration, and moral conduct. To experience freedom from dukkha, which is peace and liberation, we need to let go of our craving and resistance. This cannot be achieved without right view or right understanding of the true nature of human existence and the phenomenon world. Look deeper into our lives, and we will see the impermanence inherent in everything and every being. We're constantly reminded that everything changes. Circumstances change. People change. When our beloved ones pass away, when we lose jobs, get sick, etc. Truly, the pleasure we crave can be very fragile. Why? Because it's based on conditional things. As all conditioned things rely on various causes and conditions to manifest, there is no inherent essence in them. Therefore, the impermanence of conditioned things is inherent in their existence, just as death are inherent in lives and sorrow in happiness. Take this glass for an example. It holds water perfectly. When the sun shines on it, it reflects the light beautifully. When we tap it, it has a lovely ring. Yet, this glass is already broken. When one knocks it off the table and it falls to the ground and shatters, we say, of course. What it means is that the impermanence of the glass is inherent in its existence. When we're fully aware of this and accept the impermanence, every minute with it becomes extremely precious. And this preciousness, which is so easily neglected, now becomes so obvious and radiant. So, when the day eventually comes, when you need to be parted with your loved ones or things, you don't sorrow, grieve, beat your breast, or become distraught. Through the wonderful practice of accepting the impermanence of all things, and yet to enjoy them fully, we're training ourselves to truly appreciate everything encountered, pleasant or unpleasant, without attachment or resistance. Nothing is permanent. All sadness and sorrows will pass, just like all happiness will too. Life isn't good. Life isn't bad. Life just is. We often label experiences, and by doing so, we create dukkha. Instead of holding on to what should or should not happen, we need to look at our experience with openness and curiosity. We experience it fully in the way we would fully experience getting wet in a downpour. We might feel uncomfortable for a while, but we also understand this is just a passing state. When a feeling arises or a circumstance changes, if we simply accept the current moment as it is, without labeling, judging, or discriminating, without thinking, "Oh, this is so terrible," or "I am suffering." Instead, directly perceiving what we experience, then we can live everyday life in suchness and find peace and liberation. The second element of the path leading to peace and liberation is meditative concentration. When we are in the midst of dukkha, we usually don't want to welcome any uncomfortable emotions. We usually do everything we can to drive them away. However, sometimes in a disturbed state, doing nothing is actually better than doing something. Let me share a story with you. One day, the Buddha was walking from one town to another with a few disciples. When they were traveling, they happened to pass a lake. They stopped there and the Buddha told one of his disciples, "I'm thirsty. Please get me some water from that lake." The disciple walked up to the lake. When he reached it, he noticed that right at that moment, a bullock cart started crossing through the lake. As a result, the water became very muddy, very turbid. The disciple thought, "How can I give this muddy water to the Buddha to drink?" So he came back and told the Buddha, "The water in there is very muddy. I don't think it is fit to drink." After about half an hour, the Buddha again asked the same disciple to go back to the lake and get him some water to drink. The disciple obediently went back to the lake. And this time, too, he found that the lake was muddy. He returned and informed the Buddha about the same. After some time, the Buddha asked the same disciple to go back. The disciple reached the lake once again and found the lake absolutely clean and clear with pure water in it. The mud had already settled down and the water above it looked fit to be had. So he collected some water in a pot and brought it to the Buddha. The Buddha looked at the water and then he looked up at the disciple and said, "See what you did to make the water clean. You let it be. And the mud settled down on its own. And you got clear water. Your mind is also like that. When it's disturbed, you do nothing. Yet, you're doing something very important. You just let it be. Give it a little time, and it will settle down on its own. You don't have to put in any effort to calm it down. It will just happen. It is effortless." So, when we find our mind disturbed, we don't react instantly or impulsively. Reacting to a disturbed mind is like throwing stones in muddy waters. It muddies the water even more. Had the Buddha reacted to the muddy waters, he would have lost the chance to drink the water. When you're faced with an unpleasant situation, stop acting on your emotions. Simply be with them. Don't cover them up. Don't push them away. All you have to do is to become aware of any thoughts or intentions that tend to increase the inner turmoil and not give in to these habitual ways of coping. Simply observe what's going on and be aware of your experience as it is. Show patience long enough for the thoughts and disturbances to settle down and the mind to get clear again. Time is a great healer and revealer. If things do get too tough and emotions get the best of you sometimes, you need to treat yourself with compassion. Don't get annoyed with yourself for losing control. It is okay that every now and then you sit down with your emotions and even cry for a while. Don't punish yourself for having big emotions. Just sit down with all your drama and let it pass through you, instead of taking you over completely. Instead of distraction, sit down and feel what you don't want to feel. Moving toward a painful situation and becoming really close to it can open up our hearts in ways we never imagined before. It will set you free. Don't ignore it. Don't highlight it. And because you embrace it and be with it, it moves on. The third element of the path leading to peace and liberation is moral conduct. I would like to mention the 3 Acts of Goodness campaign in particular. Apart from gaining insight into our own craving arising from the delusions of the mind, lasting solutions to our dukkha also require us to change our behaviors of body, speech, and mind to accord with our insight. Since the source of unwholesome karma comes from our body, speech, and mind, our cultivation should start from these 3 areas. To do good deeds is to generate good physical karma by helping others with kind and beneficial deeds to lead a peaceful and honorable life. To say good words is to cultivate good speech karma and make sure that our words are benevolent, encouraging, truthful, and helpful. To think good thoughts is to cultivate the mind of loving kindness and compassion, free of the 3 poisons. The 3 acts of goodness are not just slogans, but rather the purification of the 3 karmas of body, speech, and mind. That is the Buddhist faith in action. The Buddhist ethical and moral conduct, being an integral basis for all higher spiritual attainments, aims at promoting a happy and harmonious life for both the individuals and society, leading to peace and liberation. To summarize the key points of today's talk, firstly, in our lives, pain is inevitable, but dukkha is optional. By being open to unwanted experiences, we can cultivate the curiosity, inner strength, and compassion we need to grow from them. Secondly, I want you to think about what dukkha is again. Is it a special seasoning to put on top of a salad? Or a little bump in the road? Or a small boat in the middle of a raging sea, which can be turned upside down at any time? Or a dead-end street with not enough room to turn? We decide what dukkha means to us. Thirdly, stop running away from life. Instead, learn to embrace the entirety of life. not just the paths we enjoy. Embrace life as a whole, including the bits we don't like. Until then, would you see the original face of life? Last but not least, remember, peace, liberation, and happiness don't come to you. They only come from you. Thank you for joining us in this week's online service. May the Dharma joy gained from this session be spread in all 10 directions. May you all find peace and happiness in the practice of Dharma. Amen.